Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited to be recording a heavily requested video here for the channel amidst our offseason preview series where we break down what every single team needs to look to do and what their potential off seasons could look like. Oklahoma City has perhaps been one of the most requested down in the comment section below. Of course, no surprise to me, Oklahoma City Thunder fans are great and very passionate about their team and have been ever since Oklahoma City moved in from Seattle. I'm very excited to be breaking them down with their offseason preview in this video. And if you want to see another team, please go comment it down below. I'm sure you've seen some of the comments flash on the screen of people asking for Oklahoma City. I am responding to those comments and looking at what people are saying, and I'm recording in kind of a loosey-goosey order based on what people really want to see and what they're telling me. So make sure to let me know in the comment section below who you want to see. And then also do not forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and then also turn on that notification bell so you don't miss out on more great utility sports content. And without further ado, let's talk about Mark Daigneault quick. Really loved what he did. Of course, Mike Brown, the unanimous coach of the year in the NBA, but Mark Daigneault, I think, did a phenomenal job, not only this year, but ever since being named the head coach of the Thunder franchise. Of course, has roots in that franchise back when he was coaching the G League affiliate, the Blue, I believe they're called. I know they're called that, actually. And then Mark Daigneault himself, obviously making that big step up to the NBA level, and I think he hasn't missed a beat. Obviously in the heart of a rebuild, but we've seen other coaches now kind of following suit with that. I think Will Hardy in Utah is a great example of, the next stage of coaches of what Mark Daigneault's really pioneering as young, good, qualified coaches who are leading good, young, talented teams to a lot of regular season wins. And I've been very impressed with this team. And we'll talk about that in this video preview. 2022-2023 recap is where we're going to start things off. And then afterwards, we're going to look at the NBA draft, both the Oklahoma City Thunder's lottery odds, in which we'll see what their chances are at landing Victor Wembanyama or just moving up into the top 4. And then we'll also look at some NBA draft prospects that Sam Presti would like to consider specifically in the first round this year. And one thing I have to say, Thunder fans, is as long as Sam Presti's driving the boat here, you feel pretty good about where you're likely going to land, because he does a very good job typically. I think, there are a few black marks on his career when it comes to decisions he's made. I think trading away James Harden's one of them, but for the most part, he's nailed a good majority of the moves he's made. And you have to feel really good about him being the leader of your franchise. We'll also look at free agency and how Oklahoma City, with a lot of cap space, could potentially get better, but I do have kind of a warning for Oklahoma City that I don't for some of the other young teams like a Houston, like a San Antonio, like a Detroit, and I'll talk about why I have some of those concerns with this team. And then we'll also give my early outlook for next season. That's how we'll conclude and wrap up the video, where I think Oklahoma City can be a very good team. But let's start with this past season. A season recap in which the Oklahoma City Thunder went 40-42. And if you went back and rewinded to last offseason's videos where I talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder, you could go back to mock drafts where they were picking second overall. You will hear me time and time again say, I think this team is a heck of a lot closer to being a playoff team than most people realize. And to be honest, I'm very vindicated in that. In fact, they were one win away from being a legitimate playoff team, but they were a postseason team this year with a play-in appearance and also beating the New Orleans Pelicans, knocking them out of the play-in, but then unfortunately getting outmanned by the Minnesota Timberwolves in what was a pretty tough matchup. But they went 40-42 this year. Huge step forward for the organization. I think you have to start at the head of the snake, and that is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And I really want to highlight a massive stylistic change to the way that he approached the game this season. Everyone knows Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is an elite offensive player, a very dynamic scorer. Those are the takes you're going to see on ESPN. But I don't think enough recognition has been brought, maybe to the local regions of Oklahoma City. A lot of Thunder fans are going to know this, but across national media, I have not heard this covered enough, and in fact at all. And that is Shai's big time adjustment to how he played the game. He was a skillful shot maker, specifically from the 3-point line, but his 3-point attempts dipped by nearly 3.5 less 3-point shots attempted per game, which is a massively significant alteration in the way that he was playing. Nearly 6 attempts from 3 per game, all the way down to 2.5 this year. But the scoring went up, the efficiency went up, and Oklahoma City's wins also went up. And I think Shai realized, hey, I'm such a good ball handler and I'm such a good finisher and slasher that I have no need to be taking all of these 3-pointers, and I'm not going to bail out the defense. He's not even a bad 3-point shooter. That's the incredible thing. He's actually a pretty good one, but he's really stood out to me as a player who not only has progressed his skill set, but also his approach and understanding to the game. I think another player in the NBA that would be really benefited by this type of adjustment would be Anthony Edwards in Minnesota. I don't know, will ever learn that, but Shai definitely did. And he's a player who I don't think necessarily even needed to make that adjustment, but it's still a very good one for him and the team and the way that they look to play. And talking about big time improvements, Josh Giddey took a massive step forward this year as well, increasing his field goal percentage by roughly 7%. Of course, that little float shot that he loves, I think just went in at a much higher rate this year. But I think one of the big marks on him, one of the only questions for him when he was coming out of the NBL for me, I've seen the draft graphic where it says his weakness is basically basketball. I never believed that for a second. I was the first person on YouTube to mock him in the lottery, did it way before everybody else. I've always loved Josh Giddey's game. But the one question for me was the outside shooting and how that could come along, because he did have a segmented shot that was a little unorthodox and pretty slow release point. It still is traditionally slow compared to other guards, but it's going in at a much higher rate. A 6% increase specifically, and I think a lot more confidence. Now, I think we saw in that second playing game, that's still a swing skill for him, something he needs to continue working on and improving in, because if he takes another step with his jump shot, this Oklahoma City team is going to become virtually unguardable. But their combination of length, size, and athleticism in the backcourt, plus the willingness to just drive, get downhill, and look to kick out of it, is so tough to guard that they're basically running a blender on offense where they're just getting inside, they're mucking some stuff up and they're kicking it out, and another guy's going to drive and kick, and all of a sudden your defense had to rotate and scramble 8 times, and wide open 3 or wide open layup for Oklahoma City, because they're just very smart. They've got a collection of players who can dribble, pass, shoot, which leads us into Jalen Williams, who really was the epitome of that last draft, and a guy that I liked coming into the draft. I did quite a bit. I liked his skill set, and I even wrote it in my scouting document last year that's up on the channel. I said I might not be high enough on this guy, despite really liking him, and I think, for matter of fact, I was right about that, which just makes me wish I put him higher on my board, and I wish I was a little bit louder about him on some of my mock drafts and some of my draft videos last year. There's always one guy that I feel like I regret not putting a little bit higher, that I had kind of an inkling that I should have, and I hesitated and I didn't. And Jalen Williams for me is that guy. Fantastic season. I did not expect him to shoot as well from the field as he did. This year he had a phenomenal year, and I think defensively flashed in a variety of ways. Definitely as a playmaker, but also as somebody who can sit down in a stance. And you really look at Shai, Giddey, Jaylin as the kind of backcourt trio of the future. Then the other Jalen Williams, a player out of Arkansas who really took a big step forward this year as a rookie. Coming out of Arkansas, I knew he was going to be a smart player. In fact, I'm going to read here in a second what I wrote about him, but I think he performed even better than I was expecting, specifically with his 3-point shooting. But let's flash back to what I had written about him. Jalen Williams, sophomore, smart, unique big that doesn't clog up the paint offensively. Now his shooting has been overhyped, which at the point it was only a career 25.5% 3-point shooter, but the willingness to shoot and space the floor is a start. If you're taking Williams, you're drafting him for his defense and rebounding. Jalen is one of the better defensive rebounders in the class and positionally understands the game on both ends. Quick decision maker as a center, will help against occasional zone defenses, and the amount of charges he takes as a big is a testament to his positioning, IQ, and willingness to help a team win. He will be valued highly throughout the league. And my one-word summary on him, which is something I like to do for my draft prospects, to kind of break them down quickly for anyone just looking back and wants to see a quick tidbit, it was charges. And guess what? As a rookie, he led the NBA in charges. Just kind of a testament, again, to his smarts, IQ, positional understanding. And as a backup rotational big behind a guy we're going to talk about in just a little bit, I think fantastic future in this league. Isaiah Joe, talking about Arkansas guys, Isaiah Joe, definitely a flamethrower when he came out. I was so shocked when Philadelphia moved on from him. I thought he was going to have a very nice career there. Unfortunately, they did not stick with him, and Oklahoma City reaped the benefits. Shot above 40% from three. Very good movement shooter. Also showcased that he could do a little bit more with the ball in his hands than maybe even I was aware of before this season. I think Oklahoma City's really onto something with the play style that they're operating with, the types of pieces that they've added over the last 2, 3, 4 years. And really, they're in the driver's seat moving forward as a potential team that everyone should be afraid of. And one specific reason is a guy who hasn't even suited up for them yet in Chet Holmgren. They're adding a guy who's going to be in the Rookie of the Year race next season to a roster, and we're not even talking about their draft pick yet. We're talking about a draft pick from last year, which is, again, one of the best draft classes we're going to see in recent history when it comes to what one individual team added. You think about adding Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, and Jalen Williams in one draft. Oh my goodness. They got three very, very good players, and there's a good chance that two of them become all-star type players in Jalen Williams, J-Dub, the wing type, and then also with Chet Holmgren, who I still am very high on this kid's talent. He can dribble, pass, shoot, which is the epitome of Oklahoma City basketball right now. And a big emphasis on the defensive side is what really Oklahoma City needs. And this guy fills in a lot of those needs. Now, do I think he's going to be the perfect rebounder for them? No, I still think, even though we have seen him bulk up a little bit, I've seen the pictures on Twitter. I completely understand that that was going to happen. First of all, I said that last year throughout a lot of my draft analysis, but also it was something that needed to happen. But he still is rather slight compared to some of the other big men in the league. Now, we've seen other big men get thrown around by guys like Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo, so I don't want you just hearing that about Chet Holmgren, okay? Other guys have had issues with those men on the boards as well, so Chet's going to have some of his deficiencies, but his proficiencies really outweigh those and specifically fit in really well with what OKC wants to do on offense. I think he's going to be the perfect finishing touch for them at the big man spot. We've seen how productive they've been with either Saric or Muscala at center this past year, specifically first Muscala, then Saric. And then obviously, I mean, Chet Holmgren's just a more talented shot maker, a more talented ball handler, more talented passer, and more talented finisher, which all in all leads you to a perfect big man to fit into what they're trying to do, which is why Oklahoma City could become a potential dynasty at some point. And then let's look at their draft lottery odds. Oklahoma City toward the bottom here, of course, losing in the play-in, and being able to be in the play-in alone just puts you in a spot where they only do have a 1.7% chance at Victor Wembanyama. There are 1,000 combinations in the draft lottery, specifically 1,001, but 1,000 that have an actual result, and Oklahoma City only has 17 combinations that come out in its favor, which maybe doesn't sound super exciting, but you never know. Think back to when Chicago got Derrick Rose. I mean, maybe Adam Silver would like to see Victor Wembanyama playing in Oklahoma City. I'm definitely not suggesting that the draft lottery is rigged in any way, or nor has it ever been. Hashtag NBA is rigged, but Oklahoma City, they do have a decent chance of moving up, roughly around 8% or so. I'm kind of rough rounding there, but you can see the odds on the screen. 85% of the time they will be picking at pick 12, so very likely we see them there, but it is a possibility that they could move up. And if they did, oh my goodness, Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren would literally break the NBA. And this is the one thing on draft night, teams should be praying that they get Victor Wembanyama. I've said it multiple times. I do think he is the best draft prospect. Now, I know there's arguments for other guys. I don't want to spend too much time on that right now in this video, but most teams should be praying that they get him. I think every team in the league should be praying Oklahoma City doesn't get him. And to be honest, that would be more condemning than a team not getting Victor Wembanyama, because if OKC gets him, the whole league needs to watch out, because Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren would be the best duo front court that we've probably ever seen when it's all said and done, in terms of the length, shot blocking, skill set, put the ball on the deck, finish at the rim, step out behind the three-point line. I know everyone keeps pointing to Victor Wembanyama's three-point percentage in France. watch the shots he's taking. Okay, he's literally shooting step back one-legged threes because he just wants to learn how to do it. He's kind of treating a Pro A league, which is the best league in France, like it's pickup basketball. And by the way, he's winning while doing it and scoring 20 plus points a game and still doing it semi-efficiently, which is what really makes it comical. But funny enough, Chet and Victor actually did face each other one time before. FIBA U19 World Cup, Team USA versus Team France, and Victor Wembanyama dominated Chet Holmgren the entire game. Chet Holmgren actually had a very, very rough game. Kenneth Lofton was the actual superhero for Team USA in that one, and really showcased that Victor at that point in time did struggle with physicality. Still something that'll be a question for him at the NBA level, but he completely dwarfed Chet Holmgren, and the 2 or 3 inches of height that he has over Chet Holmgren look monstrous. I'm going to be very clear about that. He looks incredibly massive, compared to Chet Holmgren, and it's kind of frightening. If you think Chet Holmgren is going to be a very good player, you have to watch out for Victor Wembanyama, which is why it's important that we talk about him in a lot of these offseason videos, specifically before the draft lottery, before we find out where he's actually going to end up going to in the NBA draft first overall. But then we look at other NBA draft prospects, and there's really two perspectives here that I think Oklahoma City could strongly consider, and I think the fan base would maybe be a little split on it. Let's look at perspective 1 first of all, and this is really the dribble, pass, shoot perspective, something I could see Sam Presti signing up for, as well as a lot of the Oklahoma City Thunder fans in the comment section, because 1, it's a very beautiful way to play basketball, where you have a bunch of drive and kick type players who are smart, can be connectors on offense, and just the overall connectivity between your team is phenomenal when you have players who can break down a defender, get to the paint, get a paint touch, and then all of a sudden they know, oh, well, defense got drawn in. My job here now is to kick and find my open teammate. And Oklahoma City already has a good balance of that, but they could add other guys. Cason Wallace, who also gives them some defensive capabilities there. Anthony Black's a player who I don't think would be there at their pick if they were to stay at 11, or excuse me, if they were to stay at 12. But I do think Anthony Black would perfectly fit what this team looks to do. I think Anthony Black maybe becomes a better Josh Giddey, possibly, because he's a little bit more skilled and capable defensively, a little bit more athletic. But Nick Smith Jr., a guy who I don't think necessarily flashes much of the passing at Arkansas that he's capable of, but I think, injuries and kind of missing some time nagged him there. Gigi Jackson, another guy who I have questions about the passing, has only really flashed some high-low skill set, but as a power forward, the dribbling and shooting is clear. He does have touch. He's able to handle the ball for his size very well, and he's very young, which would make some sense into what Oklahoma City has looked to do. Keontae George, another guy who's really flashed some of the dribbling and shot making. The passing still a question mark, but he's had moments where he looks like he's putting it together. Brandon Pajemski is probably the most NBA ready guy out of all of these. Now he is also a little bit older. He's a sophomore and has had time in the Big Ten and the WCC, where he was Player of the Year this year. So that perspective, I think, is one that Oklahoma City could really see themselves leaning into. Whereas the second perspective, and this is where we really see some divide, some people believe OKC should lean this way. Some people really fight against that, and that's adding pieces that you're lacking currently. Now, 2 dream examples that I think the Thunder fans would love to add would be Jarris Walker from Houston or Taylor Hendricks from UCF. Both of them very good options at that power forward spot, which is, if you look at the roster, the biggest positional need you would say is probably power forward. But I don't think Sam Presti is super concerned about position. I think he's more concerned about adding a very good prospect, very good player, which is really what you should look to do on draft night every single year, is add the best player you can, because things change in the NBA pretty much on any given night. And if you have good players, good talent, and with how many games players miss in general, the more talent you have on the roster, the better. And Jarris Walker, Taylor Hendricks, very, very talented two-way type players. Hendricks a little bit more of a rim protector, but still mobile out in space defensively, and a guy who can knock down the 3 ball, but he doesn't really have as much of that, dribble and pass game to him, at least at this point. Maybe you could coach that into him and get him to a spot where you want to go. Jarris Walker, a skilled playmaker and versatile hybrid defender as well. I like both of their fits on this team. Now, I have asterisks next to their names on the graphic because I just don't really find it likely that they're going to be available at their pick. unless something drastic were to change. Perhaps a trade up. OKC has so many assets, they could definitely pull something like that off. Derek Lively, a center, and I think he's really the hot button name, the hot topic when it comes to Oklahoma City Thunder basketball with the NBA draft. A lot of fans, I think, would love to have him because he gives them some of those things that they're really, really lacking, which I think Chet Holmgren is going to step in and fill in some of those things as well. But Lively's a premier shot blocker in this draft, probably the best college shot blocker in the class. You know, maybe make a case for Taylor Hendricks with some of the emphatic blocks he has, but I think Lively's length's going to translate a little bit more consistently as an actual shot blocker. Now he's a little bit less fluid out in the perimeter than Hendricks, of course, but he is significantly bigger at 7'1". He's got a phenomenal standing reach, phenomenal wingspan, but he doesn't really do the dribble, pass, shoot. He's more of a traditional, okay, I'm going to screen and roll, run in transition, I'm going to protect the rim on defense, which is good. And those are some of the things Oklahoma City really needs, in my opinion. You go back to that Minnesota game in the play-in, and yes, it's one game. And yes, it's against arguably one of the biggest teams in the league with the size that they have in both Cat and Gobert. And we saw those two dominate that game against Oklahoma City. And some might say, well, that's just going to be a weakness that this team has, and we're going to live with that. But some might say, well, why don't we try and cover up that weakness a little bit and have another option that we could go to against matchups like that? And at some point, you're going to have to match up with a Nikola Jokic and maybe in the finals at some point, who knows, maybe a Joel Embiid. If Oklahoma City were to get as far as they'd hope to go at some point, you might need a lengthy shot blocker who can be a pest on defense and really, you know, get in the way and mess some stuff up. Lively could do that. Chris Murray, maybe to a lesser extent, could be an option that they're lacking at power forward. He's kind of like a downgraded Jarris Walker, Taylor Hendricks in my eyes. And then Grady Dick, he's close to dribble, pass, shoot. He's just, the passing's not there yet. He passes in transition well, but realistically, he's more of a, you know, floor spacing, gravity type shooter, which they have a little bit of in Isaiah Joe and Lindy Waters. But I do think Grady Dick, a little bit bigger at 6'8", gives them a more consistent option as well than what Lindy Waters has really given them. I don't know if he's a huge upgrade over how Isaiah Joe played this year, to be honest. But I do think Grady Dick would fit right in with the team, just in a different way than that traditional dribble, pass, shoot, which is what Sam Presti's really looked to draft over the last 3-4 years in the first round. So that's a real big, you know, internal debate and question for Oklahoma City. And Thunder fans, I want to know right now down in the comment section below, do you prefer perspective 1 or do you prefer perspective 2? I'd really love to know what you're thinking when it comes to draft night. Maybe give me some actual names that you'd love to get, maybe even Victor Wembanyama. You can throw his name on that list too, of course. Try and manifest some of that good luck before the draft lottery. But let's look at free agency now. They do have a projected practical cap space of around $37.31 million, which maybe sounds like payday for some guys out in free agency. You think, wow, Oklahoma City already has this really great young core and the opportunity to go out and spend. And for a lot of teams, I've been saying Houston, Charlotte, San Antonio, some of the other teams, Detroit, they should go out and spend their money. But for me, I'm saying, hold up, wait a minute. If I'm Oklahoma City, I'm not spending all my money in one place. I'm not locking myself in on a big contract. I'd be very, very hesitant if I were them. And there might be some questions on, wait, why do you feel that about them? Just, I really don't think they should spend it all in one place. If they do anything, they should separate it across multiple players on kind of mid-level type deals. And the reason why is the new NBA CBA that is coming into effect is going to, I think, impact Oklahoma City quite a bit differently than some of these other young teams. And it's because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander already has his extension done. And at some point, you'd have to assume that Josh Giddey is going to get an extension. Plus, we can already kind of assume Chet Holmgren might get a big one at some point. I know he hasn't even played an NBA game yet, maybe a little premature, but trust me, he's going to be good. Plus, wing Jalen Williams is going to get a big extension at some point. And with that new second apron in the luxury tax threshold portion of that, it would really limit how Oklahoma City could team build. And their depth might become a big question at some point. Because of that, honestly, it acts a little bit as a hard cap in a way that it's going to really limit some of these teams. And, you know, it's meant to help the small market teams. But the issue is when a small market team finally has a core that they want to build around and spend with and try and push their chips in, they're not going to be able to really. because of the way the CBA works. I think it was a massive failure from both sides, both the NBA and Players Union, in my opinion. At some point, I'm going to actually have a full explanation on the CBA, how it works, and my overall thoughts on it. But I think Oklahoma City is one of the teams that's really negatively impacted by it, because at some point they would have had the ability to make a big move, push their chips in, all the other picks they have, go get another star with their guys. And they kind of lose some of that flexibility based on the new trade rules associated with that as well, plus how hard it's going to be to kind of fit everyone in under that second apron that I mentioned. So instead, I think there's some potential targets that do make some sense, and I think they target around that mid-level exception, around $10 to $13 million annually. The new mid-level exception itself is at $12.5 million. So realistically, with $37 million, they could add about 3 of those guys, and then they could actually use their non-taxpayer mid-level exception as well to add a 4th. So they could add 4 serious good rotation players that fit their roster, all kind of on similar type deals, which would really help their depth long term, and also give them massive flexibility in making trades, because we know those middling contracts do go a long way in helping teams pull off some deals, and especially with the new trade rules that are going to be in place, it's going to open up the door for them. So 2 options I really like from Milwaukee, and it seems like they're in every video, but if you couldn't tell, I think these are great options for teams looking to improve and make playoff pushes at some point, and maybe even move deeper, which I think Oklahoma City, if things go right for them, they could maybe have the pathway to doing that. Joe Ingles, Jay Crowder, 2 guys I really like. They're very different. Jay Crowder more physical. Now I do think he's at a point in his career where he's trending a little bit more toward where Marcus Morris is, where if he loses a step, the defensive versatility that he offers completely falls out the door, and the shot making isn't consistent enough. So you have to be a little cautious with Crowder. But Joe Ingles, I think he's a player whose game isn't going to age. Even coming off of an ACL, he's looked fantastic for Milwaukee, and it's because he's more capable with the ball in his hands as a decision maker than Crowder. His jump shot's more consistent off the ball. Now defensively, he's going to get targeted at times. We already know that. But the idea here is, if you're Oklahoma City, you have so much youth, length, athleticism, and then now hopefully shot blocking with Holmgren behind Ingles, that wouldn't become a disaster for you. Bruce Brown, a small physical guard who kind of operates like a big man from time to time. I think he'd actually fit in very well with Oklahoma City. He'd give them a fun little wrinkle to add into their lineups. Kind of like a little bit of a Lou Dort, but stylistically different offensively with what he gives you. Very good right corner shooter, not a great left corner shooter, which is one of the funniest data points in the NBA this year. But he's also a very good screen and roll guard, which is not something I typically have to say in a video, but that's really what he is. And I think it would give Oklahoma City a fun way to kind of force matchups that they want onto Giddey or Shai, and I think he gives them the physical toughness they'd look for. Jeff Green, I think, would be a nice locker room presence specifically, but also throughout the duration of an 82-game season, he still gets up there. And I know a reunion back with Oklahoma City / the Supersonics franchise, right, would make some sense here too. I'm sure the fans would really welcome him back in after he was previously traded for Kendrick Perkins. We know that, I think he'd get a warm ovation, warm welcome back. Grant Williams. Now, this is a player who might exceed that $13 million mark, but I would be shocked if he were to exceed about $18 to $20 million, which is why I would strongly consider him if I'm Oklahoma City. He's a restricted free agent, but with the new restricted free agency rules as well, the 10% little kicker, if you were to give him $18 million, essentially Boston, who is in a really tough spot with their money, and right around the corner is a potential Jalen Brown extension, maybe Supermax extension, they'd have to count every single penny. And if you sign him for $18 million, it'd be like basically $19.8 million a year for Boston, which might really de-incentivize them from keeping him around. I do think it would become a movable contract down the road, but he would also fit into what this team needs. Another physical, tough player, kind of like a younger Jay Crowder in a way. Now, I know the three-point shooting has come and gone at moments this year for Boston. He's lost minutes with Missoula as the coach, and how three-point centric Boston has become. Grant Williams maybe hasn't perfectly fit into that, but I do think he's a player that could really help Oklahoma City, because I think defensively he's smart, he's versatile. And then Thomas Bryant, not a mid-level exception player. Let me be very clear about that. This is a guy who would probably sign for the biannual exception, around $4.8 million a year. And if you can get him on a 2-year 9.6, I feel pretty good about that if you're Oklahoma City, as a depth big to have behind Chet Holmgren. I think with Jalen Williams' three-point renaissance that we've seen, the big man Jalen Williams, then we know Thomas Bryant could fit in beside him. But with Chet Holmgren's skill set, Bryant and Holmgren could definitely play together. Gives you some offensive rebounding and defensive rebounding, which I think is still something OKC needs to address and find at some point. Bryant could be a very nice, cheap option for them, who has been productive at moments in his career. You think back to Washington a little bit earlier this year with the Lakers when Anthony Davis would be out. I think Bryant could give the Thunder a little nice bench option. We'll see if he's content with playing little minutes, because so far he hasn't been in his career, but still I think could be a nice patchwork big behind the core guys. So let's look at the early outlook now, and I'm very excited about this Thunder team. If you couldn't tell by my excitement throughout this video how much I praised Chet Holmgren without him even playing an NBA game yet, how ecstatic I was about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a player who I've always loved even back when he was the Clippers in his Kentucky days as well. I was very high on him in his own draft, and looking back at a redraft, he probably goes second or third overall very easily and very convincingly. That's how good he is. This Thunder team is fantastic. They have the right coach. They have a GM. They have a guy you can trust running the show, makes sound decisions typically. You have the young core that you want. You have the pathway to add good veterans to this team if you want to. You have another lottery pick that, knock on wood if you're any other fan, but might end up with Victor Wembanyama. But even say moving up to 2, 3, 4 gives you either a massive trade chip, or I'm sure the Thunder would love to add a Brandon Miller to their roster. And I mean, if Amen Thompson was an option for them, they would just say, yeah, we'll take him, and we'll figure out if he fits or not, right? They might just try and have the best G League team in the NBA too in the same year that they're trying to make a playoff push, because that's just how loaded they are on young talent. There's a lot of young guys I didn't even mention in this video that are pretty solid players. A guy like Ousmane Dieng, for example, could be a guy who takes the next step forward, and we didn't see a lot from him this year, but perhaps he balls out and shows out in year number 2. I wouldn't be shocked against it because I like it. Another player I should have maybe mentioned in draft conversation was Ryan Rupert, because it's been back-to-back years that Oklahoma City drafted an NBL guy. Perhaps they come back and do it again with Ryan Rupert from the Breakers. And I think overall, Oklahoma City's in a very strong spot. I think that they have all the pieces you need to put together a contending type roster. Now it's just about making those small moves, those minor adjustments, and seeing some more of that internal progression to get to where they want to go. If I had to give a very early prediction before the draft lottery, before the offseason, I would say they're a playoff team next year. I feel very, very confident about that. I see them taking another massive stride forward, specifically centered around Giddey and also Chet Holmgren's appearance. And I think that that's going to go a long way in this team becoming a real dangerous team, and a team nobody wants to face in a 7-game series either. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. It was a lot of fun to record. Thank you so much for watching. Here at Utility Sports, a lot of work goes into these videos. If you wanted to know, I am recording this at 2:11 in the morning after working a 14-hour day. So a lot of work's gone in to a video like this. So I do really hope you enjoy the work that goes in. If you do, make sure to leave a like on the video, hit subscribe, and then also hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future uploads. Again, thank you all so much for watching. I'm very, very excited. Don't forget to comment what team you'd like to see next, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.